Very nice meeting you all, and thanks again for the invitation. So I'm just starting the timer to make sure I stay on time. Yeah, so basically, like Max, you said a few words about my background. So I studied engineering as a training initially in telecommunications and computer science, and I like gradually, like project after project, started to focus more and more on climate and sustainability. I started my career like really working on optimizing the energy footprint of telecom infrastructure, data centers, ICT, and this kind of stuff. And then basically, like most of my recent experience, I've been on focusing on clean tech. I managed a clean tech and climate tech market research firm called GreenTech Lab, where we produce different studies for corporate customers and public customers too. And basically, it was during that time that I started to like, while we were researching different topics like carbon removal, biomanufacturing, and others, that are interviewing different startups and investors and scientists in the space, that I met a few entrepreneurs I started to work with more closely, including like the fusion power company you mentioned. So it was a scientist who developed a technology when he was at Columbia University after 15 years of research on nuclear fusion. He's Italian and he wanted to move back to Europe to build a company. So I helped him to find partners, labs where to get started, and his first investors. I participated like in that round too. I helped, the Sustainable Scholars company you mentioned, Pili, also invested in that company. And yeah, basically, I realized I really enjoyed working with founders, very, very early stage scientists and engineers building companies that could make a dent in climate and sustainability challenges. And I wanted to find a way to help more of them and build an organization to support them on a more systematic way. And last summer, I met my new co-founder, Johnny, who basically, so he's an entrepreneur himself. He built and exited a company in software in the UK, and then he moved to Paris 2 years ago, and he was running a program called Entrepreneur First, which basically invests in individuals before they have a company and help them to find their co-founder. He's been running that for 2 years, and we realized we had very similar ideas on what we wanted to do next, supporting founders, typically scientists and engineers only in climate. And we started to build a new program together, which we are about to launch. So basically, the pitch is this one. So we aim to create new companies. It's different from an accelerator where you work with existing companies. So we aim to create new companies focusing on really high impact climate opportunities across decarbonization, carbon removal, adaptation, and specifically deep tech companies where there's a strong technological and science focus. And we do that by partnering with typically domain experts, scientists, engineers who have ideas. Some of them, maybe they have a technology they've been working on. So we basically pre-identify opportunity areas, and I'm going to give a few examples of those. So which can be, for instance, low carbon construction or hydrogen or carbon capture, where we see, okay, there's a lot of interesting technologies which are maturing, and we see the market moving. We see interesting ideas, and then we basically try to find great potential founders for new companies to create in the space. So typically that will be people who've done a PhD or a postdoc in a related technical area, or it can be in some case someone who's been working in industry in a big energy company or an engineering firm, and they want to move to the entrepreneurial side to apply their skills to building to solving a climate problem. Or in some cases, it's people who've been working in a startup before, and they want to transition to starting a new company focused on climate. So we onboard these individuals, and then we work alongside them for a period which is typically up to a year, 9 to 12 months, during which they're basically part of our team, and we look at all the different technologies, approaches, potential customers and markets where there's a meaningful company to build within that opportunity area. We de-risk the company together. We assemble we find the right co-founders. Once we have a better idea of what company we want to build, so we get a better idea of, okay, what should be the co-founder 2 and potentially co-founder 3 for that first founder. We assemble an advisory board, and we then spin out the company, and we invest 250K in pre-seed in the company we create together. So I'm going to give a few examples of like some of what we call opportunity areas or focus areas we're working on at the moment, and where we're actively looking for founders to join us and build companies, which are in no way restrictive, but it's just the ones we happen to focus on right now, but we're looking at a broader opportunity landscape, obviously. So for instance, one area we're very interested in is low carbon construction. So as some of you might know, construction and building materials in particular are responsible for a very high share of greenhouse gas emissions. It's about 6 to 8% only related to cement and concrete. And basically where these emissions come from, they come specifically, like in the vast majority, for the binding agents within concrete, or like what is basically the binding agent within the cement. So cement is the binder in concrete. And so that's called clinker. And basically the process to make this material, where you basically burn limestone to very high temperature, where you have emissions from the fossil energy you use to burn this material, but also from the chemical reaction in which the limestone turns into lime and emits CO2. So it's very, very hard to tackle because you have these two sources of emission. So there's different possibilities to tackle this problem. So some of it is to use material more efficiently with like new fillers or new way to optimize the concrete production. A very, very interesting area is to substitute that clinker material with other materials. For instance, some alkaline material that will basically substitute part of the clinker. So it can be waste materials like slags, like calcinated clay, and like there's a lot of different ideas. Or you can use like carbon capture on site, either on the process itself or or post combustion. Or you could also, for instance, reuse CO2 in the process of curing the concrete, for instance. So those are some of the ideas we're looking at, and it's not unclear at this stage which one will be the most efficient. So we need to hedge our bets, but we're looking at actively at building a company in that space. Another way to look at the low carbon construction problem is also to switch completely the material and to look at CLT, mass timber. So CLT stands for cross-laminated timber. It's basically like timber which is engineered in a way that it achieves very, very similar structural properties than concrete. But today there's a few challenges because on one side it could really it could really benefit from prefabrication methods to basically build parts of the building in a factory instead of building them on site. So it could achieve higher efficiency. It's very well optimized for this kind of techniques. But on the other hand, there's a very strong constraint on the supply, like the sustainable supply of enough wood to make it really scalable at a very, very large scale. So we're wondering whether there's interesting plays, whether through bioengineering or other ways to scale up the sustainable supply. And so we are very interested in people who have ideas both on the prefabrication and also on that sustainable supply in low carbon wood materials. Another area we are looking at actively is the broader landscape of what's called carbon management, so which includes carbon recycling and carbon removal. So carbon removal is when you take CO2 typically from the atmosphere and you draw down that carbon and you either reuse it, that's when it's recycling, or you sequester it on a typical on a geological storage or durable materials like concrete, for instance. So there's a few interesting areas we're looking at. Typically, we're very interested in ocean-based carbon removal, which is very emerging, and there's not so many projects right now, but it has a huge potential because the ocean is one of the biggest carbon pumps we have. So there's interesting approaches using seaweed or using a CO2 mineralization process in which, in addition to sequestering carbon, you also create alkalinity. So you counter ocean acidifications. There's different approaches to use electrochemistry, both on ocean-based system, but also beyond ocean. Synthetic biology, geoengineering, synthetic biology, sorry, and bioengineering is also something we are looking at. And then on the carbon recycling, yeah, electroreduction, photoelectroreduction of CO2 are definitely areas we are super interested in. Hydrogen, I'm going to go quickly on this one. I didn't plan to show that graphic. It was really to illustrate like the very sheer diversity of potential routes toward making low carbon hydrogen. and most of the the announcement focus often on electrolysis, which I think is an interesting tool, but there's other pathways using either carbon capture or plasma catalysis or different areas. So we are very interested in like non-conventional area to producing low carbon hydrogen, because it's going to be a huge actor in decarbonizing energy where electrification won't work. But there's going to be a need for much more than electrolysis, even though electrolysis is going to be very important, obviously. And then finally, a very transversal area, which I think are illustrated by a few already successful companies in the space, is like how to use computational tools to develop new biotech-based or chemistry-based climate solutions. So to give one specific example, on the conversion of CO2 into new materials or for electrolysis, many of those systems use catalysts, and there's a need to develop new and better catalysts to improve these reactions. So we're very interested in using computational approaches and tools to develop better catalysts or more sustainable materials. And so we're already in touch with a few founders working in that space, and this is definitely an area we're super interested in. And there's more. I won't go into detail, but basically we're looking at way more. But the ones I presented are the ones we focus on the most right now. And yeah, I mean, if this is interesting to you, or you're interested in some of these areas, or you know people in your network, scientists, engineers who are working in similar ideas and are interested in building climate companies, please check out our website, buildaclimatestartup.com, or refer them to your colleagues. And yeah, looking forward to connect with all of you. Thanks for the invite.